Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Or I guess since this is virtual, so it might be morning or evening. Thanks for joining this virtual conference. In this presentation, I'm going to talk a bit about our experience running a remote SOC, which is especially critical during this current COVID-19 pandemic. At the end of the presentation, I will leave a few minutes for questions. So first, let's introduce myself. My name is Slavik Markovich, and this is how I look like before the quarantine. Now I have the quarantine beard, so just a bit different. I'm managing the Cortex XOR product within Palo Alto Networks. And I joined Palo Alto Networks when the startup I co-founded and was the CEO of Demisto was acquired in March 2019. And I started Demisto in late 2015 when at the time I was VP with McAfee. And I actually got to see firsthand the struggles of the security operations center analysts and managers to cope with a growing amount of alerts and security tools with limited headcount and no consistent process. So when I started Demisto, I actually went and talked with a lot of CISOs and SOC managers, and I sat and watched behind the shoulder of analysts, kind of looking at what is the process and what they're doing. And it was not a fun thing to see. You know, analysts are not happy, and SOC is not a happy place. So it's just a continuous firefighting and crazy amount of alerts. There's really no time to dive deeper into any alert, always under pressure to close and move to the next one. Alert fatigue is real in the sense that you really cannot cope with hundreds or even thousands of alerts a day. It's just completely impossible to effectively deal with manually. So when you have too many alerts and too many tools, it just requires too much manual action, and manual action takes time. And so on average, I think conservatively, there's probably around like 30-ish security tools for each organization. And, you know, just managing them and just coping with switching between them, it just cripples the ability to detect and respond quickly. So that affects your mean time to resolution as well. Time is usually spent on kind of integrating tools, pivoting across, or just, you know, copy pasting, which is a really known problem. So it's really hard to conduct investigations effectively. One of the outcomes of too many disjointed point products is the lack of context for investigations. So security analysts need to manually integrate between multiple data sources and tools to get a total picture of the attack that's needed to actually accurately investigate. And when you don't have the right data, investigations just take too long, and you end up with like incidents that take, you know, days and weeks to resolve, and threats just continue progressing. So the problem is even more interesting when you're dealing with remote teams. Team silos prevent efficient and timely data sharing. Even when the team, you know, the security team is spearheading the entire response process, they usually need input and helping hands from the affected end users. So, and the IT team and the NOC and so on. And these shareholders don't usually use the same tools or have the same context, making life much tougher for the security team as they manually reach out to everyone for information collection. So it's much harder when you're remote. You cannot just go into a physical war room, have all the relevant teams in there and just talk it out, right? You have to have the same tools, the same context, and kind of do it remotely. And because you know, security teams are busy putting out the daily fires in the SOC, they don't usually have the time or flexibility to fully document and capture the knowledge that they gain while handling the incidents, and visualize all the metrics that can tell them how the SOC is really doing. And when you don't measure, you cannot improve, right? And unifying metrics just requires so much work for manually collecting data across different sources, and just regularly maintaining that, it's just doesn't scale, it doesn't work. So those are the big problems that, when I started the Misto, this is what I actually kind of tried to solve. So now, with the new COVID-19 reality, the problem is actually bigger, because every SOC team is a remote team, right? So shift to virtual work is redefining how teams interact and complete complex tasks together. So when your workforce goes remote, you no longer have a choice, and you must rethink the way you do your business processes and what tool strategy you choose for optimum collaboration. Even worse, companies are now more vulnerable. More threats are emerging because all workers are now remote workers. That kind of complicates the threat model and just increases the attack surface. So it is critical to respond in the most efficient, timely manner to protect your organization from these emerging threats. So let's pause for a second, and I'll show you a video of how Palo Alto Networks actually coped with that issue.
When the unexpected happened, the world's largest next-generation cybersecurity company was ready. Using the same cloud-delivered security innovations that protect 70,000 global enterprises, governments, and schools to keep its own security operations center up and running.
We went from working together out of our state-of-the-art SOC at Palo Alto Networks HQ to our living rooms and home offices. We needed to maintain the same strong security posture that we had always delivered, and we had to do it incredibly quickly.
Matt and his team used Palo Alto Networks' speed, agility, and automation to move the SOC, protecting the world's largest security company from on-prem to at home without disruption.
Our SOC was already using Cortex XDR and Cortex XSOAR, so we were able to seamlessly transition to a remote SOC in a couple days. Thanks to Cortex XSOAR's built-in case management capabilities, we can still easily manage incidents and send them to each other for collaborative investigations.
Backed by 15 years of cybersecurity innovation, the team continues to protect their company and their customers against today's most advanced threats and tomorrow's unexpected challenges.
And though we're no longer sitting across the room from each other, we're still doing everything in real time together to keep protecting the business regardless of wherever we might
be. So that was kind of a quick video to show how we at Palo Alto Networks actually had to cope with moving to a fully remote SOC. And I'm actually going to dive a bit deeper into how we're really doing it, our architecture, our shift management, some recommendations later in the slides. So yes, remote SOC is a challenge, right? So SOC is a challenge, remote SOC is even more of a challenge, but there's also an opportunity here. So if we get this right, we can really benefit from a bigger talent pool from around the world, make this whole, shift management, follow the sun, and the incident handoffs actually work without, sacrificing our full SOC analysts and improve the streamline our processes. There are different studies that show that the number of unfilled security jobs is steadily increasing. I think it's 2020, it's just over 1.5 million of open unfilled security jobs. Even worse, if you manage to hire a security analyst, statistically speaking, she will not last longer than 18 to 20 months, right, on average, because her job is just so hard. And, you know, the capability to actually go and hire in different time zone, the capability to have the right tools to support those remote workers is really, really important. And the reason why security analysts don't last in the same job for a while is the reasons that I outlined before, meaning just the huge amount of stress, alert fatigue, and just the amount of manual work. So if we're looking at our kind of, you know, optimal solution, what do security teams need to succeed, especially when working remotely? So I would claim that the biggest piece of that is having some sort of orchestration automation capability. So if the analyst doesn't need to do the manual step-by-step actions for each incident, it frees the analyst's time to actually focus on the more important things. And here, I'm not talking about completely replacing the analyst and fully automating the work, because I think we're not there yet. But if I can automate 50, 60, 80% of the manual work, then really the effects of firefighting and, you know, not having time to actually deep dive into the real important issues just goes away. And I'm going to talk about what's important for automation orchestration in the next slide. The other thing that's really important is to have a central management for your entire incident lifecycle. And this is critical because I see some SOCs kind of reuse regular ticketing systems that are not meant for security. And there's some issues with that. But if it's an incident case management, then it has all the specialized tools that help you kind of manage this whole incident lifecycle in a secure and efficient manner. So again, touching on that in the next slides. The other thing is really important for you to have a way to just share the knowledge in a collaborative way. So not only kind of create a ticket and for someone else to look at it, but also have a capability to kind of chat and share the full timeline of an incident from a single place. So that's the collaboration. And of course, it's very important to have mobile access as well, because if you have, you know, especially when you're working remotely, you know, some of us have kids, and sometimes you just have to step away from the computer, and the capability to kind of look quickly at something that requires your attention and just make a decision and move on is really critical. So having mobile access for your remote SOC is critical as well. So let's kind of dive into each of those separately. So when I say playbook automation, it kind of captures multiple concepts in one place. One is that you have to have a developed kind of incident response plan, right? You have to understand what is the process that your analyst goes through when resolving an incident. And when you take that process and move it from your kind of Word document into a computer managed, you know, computer digital form, now you can enforce consistency, right? Because all analysts kind of go through the same process, and you can enforce a kind of a QA, right, or quality assurance. So you can actually check that the process is indeed executed and was done, and no step was skipped, right? So that's the one thing. But it turns out that the more you kind of or the more you kind of lay out the process, you see that a lot of the tasks are repeating and are really ripe for automation. And so it's fairly easy to identify those tasks and then replace them with automation, thus removing a lot of the manual work that the analyst was doing. And again, I'm not suggesting that we can automate everything, but there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that, yes, you can automate. Things like, I don't know, failed logins or password resets or VPN alerts or, you know, phishing attempts. A lot of those, the analyst doesn't really need to look at it because the analyst basically follows the process that is very, very similar and probably can be easily automated as well. But when I say that it's actually a mix between automating tasks and manual tasks, this actually kind of allows the analyst to do what humans are good at, right? Making decisions. Because if you look at the incident response plan, usually the first step is kind of gather all the data, right? Triage, right? So you get all the information from multiple tools, maybe enrich it with threat intelligence, do other things of that nature. Then you kind of get to a decision stage. Here, the analyst looks at the results of the triage and says, yes, it's bad. Let's contain it. Let's, you know, remove this endpoint from our network. Let's block this IP. Let's blacklist this hash. So the analyst can make the decision, and then the response on containment and response phase can also be automated, because at this point, there's no point for the analyst to actually go manually into your firewall and set up this IP to be blacklisted. You can just, you know, do it automatically based on the responses from the triage. And so this is a lot of kind of mix and match between automated tasks that kind of remove a lot of the pain, and then analyst decisions doing what humans are really good at. And a lot of this is also communicating with third parties, right? So there's no point in the analyst to actually, you know, ask a user, hey, is it you connecting via the VPN, or maybe texting him, getting like a response? You can actually automate all of that away, and thus free the time for your analyst to do something meaningful. Now, when choosing a tool that helps you with automation, you really need to focus on the kind of the number of security tools or IT tools this integrates with, the number of actions that are available, but most importantly, it's really critical to see that the tool itself does not require extensive coding, right? Most SOCs out there don't really have coders or developers. They have security engineers. And so you really have to kind of have a way to kind of drag and drop the actions, you know, piece them together in a visual way without actually kind of going to Python or JavaScript to do the same thing. So that's the automation orchestration. The incident lifecycle management or case management is really important, because if it's specific for security, it really has a lot of features that regular like ticketing system don't have. So for example, very, very strong, enforcement of security, role-based access, separation of data and things of that nature. Then things like the capability to track stages of the incident and then measure them and present them. So you can track specific SLAs from detection to first eyes to a decision to containment to remediation. If you track all of them separately, you can actually improve, because you can understand where the gaps are and kind of invest in them. So this is not kind of usual for like regular ticketing systems. The other thing is that when you deal with security incidents, there's a lot of data involved. And so just having out-of-the-box layout that shows you per incident type all the right data in one place with minimal white space, and so the security analyst can look at it on his computer or on his mobile and kind of see the data in one glance and make a quick decision. This is critical, because as I said before, it's just too many alerts to spend time on each alert separately. Okay, obviously mobile is really important as well. And then having all the dashboards and relevant reports is critical. The other thing is kind of important to have a shift management, right? So you, at any point in time, you need to understand who's currently on call, who is going to be on call, who to transition or do the handoff to. And not only you have to understand it, but the system has to understand it. And so when you manage kind of your incoming queue of incidents, you can auto-assign based on who's currently on call and with the least amount of load. So this auto-assigning actually, again, reduces the burden from the SOC manager of understanding who to assign to just based on a random round robin. So that's kind of the case management. And then the last piece of the puzzle is, I think, what we call a virtual war room. So I mentioned the concept of war room before, which basically has, everybody in the same physical room and kind of all hands on deck for this particular incident. So when you're working remotely, that's kind of not possible. So the way to kind of mitigate that is to have what we call virtual war room, which is basically a chat window on steroids per incident. So per incident, you can create this virtual war room and chat and invite other analysts into that virtual war room. But you can also chat with a bot, and you can then direct the bot to do actions on your behalf interactively with all the security tools that are connected to the system, and have everybody see the same kind of timeline, the same everything that that is shared on that virtual world. So you can say, hey, dear bot, go to this endpoint, retrieve this endpoint, this file, detonate it in this sandbox, give me the responses, and if it's malicious, isolate the endpoint. So you can do all of it just via chat ops, and using that, you really kind of save the analysts huge amount of time of context switching between many security tools, but you also save the analysts a lot of time on training and onboarding and maintaining the documentation of the incident, because it's kind of auto-documenting. And then you don't have to train on all the other security tools, because there's one kind of blessed way to access those security tools from one interface. So chatting, chat ops, and kind of the virtual war room, I think is critical, especially for remote teams. So that's kind of generally what we really want to see from a tool that will be kind of the, one pane of glass for the security team. Now let's look specifically in Palo Alto Networks and how we're structured our architecture and our team. So first of all, let's talk a bit about our security tools and how we actually operationalize them. Obviously, being a security vendor, we mostly use our own security tools. So you can see at the bottom, most of our enforcement tools are Palo Alto Networks. So be that firewalls, endpoints, EDR or XDR, cloud control, all of those kind of feed into our own data lake for the most part. And then we kind of correlate all this data internally using XDR, which then produces the incidents for the SOC analysts to kind of focus on. We also have Devo, which is kind of our SIEM for anything that XDR doesn't support yet. And then our centerpiece in the SOC is Cortex XSOR, which is our security orchestration, automation, and response tool. And this tool basically kind of ingests all of those incoming events from all the sources that can be, obviously from XDR, but many other types of sources, which I'll show in a second. And the tool kind of runs playbooks to automate a lot of the enrichment and triage. So we have really tons of information that we use, our own autofocus, but VirusTotal, ThreatStream, Shodan, Risk IQ and IP info, and then a bunch of other security tools. But it's important to understand we actually invoke them automatically. So we don't do that manually at all. And then we kind of aggregate, triage all of it, and auto-assign to the analyst that is currently on call. And if there needs to be escalation, then we actually can escalate and page this analyst, kind of, hey, take a look at it immediately. This is like an executive and he has a real problem, like, you know, something is really wrong. So this is kind of the flow of the information, and really the ability to kind of use this central piece that provides the automation, the full case management, and the collaboration kind of replaced many of the other tools for us. So, you know, we used to have like the ticketing system, separate ticketing. We used to have separate kind of scripts and, you know, automations. We used to use like different chatting things. Now they're all kind of combined into one place. And by the way, I would consider us to be like a medium SOC. So we're not huge amounts of people. Okay, we're nine folks. And those 9 folks basically have their own shifts and on-call duties and so on. And each of them is usually doing a 30-30-30 model, meaning 30% response, 30% hunting and proactive lookup, and then 30% kind of constant improvement of the tools, kind of thinking of automating more, thinking of improving detection and things of that nature. So this is kind of our architecture. And here are some examples of our playbooks. So you see on the left-hand side, all the kind of incident playbooks. So we have a playbook for each kind of type of alert. This is an example, like an XDR alert or AirWatch or Prisma and so on. And usually we have sub-playbooks that help you to analyze that particular alert. This is the triage collection of all the information, assigning severity, assigning the user, getting all the details. Then enrichment. So we have enrichment from all the sources that I've shown before. Then we usually, when the decision is made, we have containment, where, okay, we lock this account, we block this you know, IP, we blacklist this hash, and so on and so forth. And the last piece of the puzzle is kind of the remediation playbook. And in remediation sub-playbook, we basically kind of either fix it or try to fix it, or usually we open the ticket for IT to kind of reimage an endpoint or do physical kind of, you know, badge access and removal and so on. So those are kind of the pieces. Just a bit of best practices, and we're kind of getting short on time. We find that having kind of constant communication in the team is really critical. So I mentioned the virtual war room, but we also have like daily check-ins where we have like video conference where the entire team kind of reports and discusses the, you know, what's up. Then I already mentioned the model of 30-30-30, alerts, hunting, and continuous improvement. Critical for us is to basically measure everything. Whatever we can measure, we measure. So MTTR, but also internal SLAs. So we constantly are in this cycle of improving whatever is the current broken thing. Then, of course, you know, the chatting we use extensively. And because we kind of auto-document, it's really, really important to kind of see the results of our incident, document, and have this feedback loop. So when you solve an incident, also kind of close and push the resulting conclusions back into the enforcement tools. So just to summarize, really we use internally XOR, which is the security orchestration automation and response tool, to basically standardize around and do all the activities of the SOC and have a single place to hold all the knowledge, single source of truth. All the processes are captured there, and this drives basically faster resolution. So with that, let me just call out where you can get a bit more information. So just go to the Palo Alto Networks website. You can see there an XOR or Cortex section, within it XOR, and we have plenty of white papers, blogs, and other data that you can just download and see. The other thing that we have is a community edition that you can download and try XOR right now and see if it changes or helps you with your remote SOC. And last but not least, here's we did a full webinar around remote SOC, which actually dives into details and has demos and so on. And you can register there also from our website. So with that, thank you so much. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I will go over the questions in the chat and answer them after the presentation. Thank you.